She made an accidental gesture in sign language to the Alpha King's silent son during a pack feast, and the great hall fell deathly quiet. She was unaware that she was the first person, aside from his tutor, to have ever used his language, and the solitary king, observing from his throne, would reshape the world to ensure she remained. The firelight glittered in the pewter goblets like trapped embers. Ilara's hands were unsteady as she balanced the heavy wooden tray, navigating a path between pack alphas in fur-lined cloaks and their mates adorned with amber and jade. After 3 months of service in the stronghold, she still hadn't grown accustomed to the weight of predatory wolfish eyes tracking her every move. The head steward hissed an order to bring more mead for Alpha Cashin, shoving her toward the high table. Ilara's heart pounded against her ribs. The high table, where the king himself presided. She had only ever seen Alpha King Kale from afar, a figure who seemed carved from granite and shadow, with eyes that could stop a heart. He was in his dark leather armor even at the feast, as if expecting a challenge to break out between courses. But it was not the king who gave her pause. It was the small boy seated next to him. Prince Rylan could not have been more than 7. While the surrounding alphas laughed and clashed their cups, the child sat in perfect stillness, his gaze fixed on his untouched plate. Dark hair tumbled over his pale cheeks, and his small hands were still in his lap like sleeping birds. No one addressed him. No one even glanced his way. Ilara approached the table, her steps muffled by the rushes on the stone floor. She reached for the king's empty cup, her motions precise and practiced. Don't look at him. Don't speak unless you're spoken to. Don't. A hurried servant jostled her arm. Time seemed to thicken and slow. The tray tipped. 3 pewter goblets slid toward the edge, tumbling through the air in a clatter of metal. They crashed onto the table right before Prince Rylan, dark mead exploding across the oaken surface like a fresh wound. The entire hall went silent. Hundreds of conversations ceased. Drinking horns froze midway to lips. The drummers in the corner halted, the last beat hanging in the air like a held breath. Ilara's knees hit the floor. "Forgive me, your majesty," but her gaze found the prince first. Mead had splattered his sleeve. A piece of a shattered cup lay inches from his hand. Yet the boy did not flinch, did not make a sound. He just stared at the chaos with wide, dark eyes, his small frame rigid with a fear he could not voice. Without thinking, Ilara's hands moved. "Are you all right?" She signed it quickly, a muscle memory from a life before this one, the same way she would have signed to her little brother before the sickness claimed him. Her fingers formed the well-known shapes, the gesture for you, the worried brow, the inquisitive tilt of her head. Prince Rylan's head snapped up. His eyes met hers, truly met them. They were the color of the forest at midnight, enormous in his small face, and suddenly they blazed with something that looked like lightning. The prince's hands flew up from his lap. "I'm fine," he signed back, his motions sharp with exhilaration. "You can sign." You know how his little hands trembled as they shaped the words, moving so fast they were a blur. A smile broke across his face, the kind of smile that had been kept from the sun for far too long. "No one understands signs but my teacher," Rylan continued, leaning forward. "Are you new? What is your name? Do you know the sign for wolf? I learned it yesterday. Star." Silence, the king's voice sliced through the hall. Every head turned, every spine straightened. Ilara felt the word tighten around her throat. King Kale rose from his seat, unfolding to his full, imposing height. He was tall, impossibly so, with shoulders that seemed to block out the firelight. His circlet of dark, hammered metal sat on his brow, studded with stones the color of a wolf's eye. He wasn't looking at Ilara. He was looking at his son. Prince Rylan's hands froze mid-gesture. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by that awful stillness. The boy's gaze fell to his lap, and his shoulders hunched inward, making him seem even smaller. The king's gaze then shifted to Ilara. She couldn't breathe. His eyes were the color of a winter storm. "You," he said, his voice a low growl. Stand. Elara's legs barely held her as she rose. Around the hall, the pack alphas whispered behind their hands. She heard snippets of their words. Signing to the prince, never seen him respond, just a human servant, the audacity. King Kale descended from the dais, each step measured. The crowd parted for him. He stopped a few feet from Elara, close enough for her to see the silver at his temples and the faint scars on his knuckles from old battles. Where did you learn that? His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. In my village, your majesty, Elara's voice was a cracked whisper. My brother, he was born deaf. I learned to speak with my hands so he would not be alone. The king's expression was unreadable. Your brother? Where is he? He passed, sire. 5 years ago. Something flickered in the king's eyes, too fast to name. He glanced back at Prince Rylan, who was watching them with a desperate, pleading expression. The alphas awaited their king's judgment, some eager for a spectacle. King Kale turned to his steward, a lean wolf with spectacles perched on his nose. Find this woman's name and her duties. Report to my study within the hour. He returned to his throne without another word. The drummers hesitantly began their rhythm again. Conversations restarted. Servants scurried to clean the mess. But Prince Rylan's eyes never left Elara as she was escorted away. His small hands moved one last time, hidden below the table where only she could see. Thank you. Elara spent the next hour in the servants' quarters, awaiting a summons from the guards. The others gave her pitying looks and a wide berth. You're the girl who spilled meat on the prince, an older woman asked, shaking her head. Best make peace with your gods, child. But when the steward arrived, he wasn't flanked by guards. He held a scroll. You are to report to the East Wing kitchens at dawn, he stated, adjusting his spectacles. You've been assigned the morning shift. Your duties will include the preparation and delivery of the breakfast service to the prince's private garden. Elara stared. I'm not being dismissed. Dismissed? The steward's lips twitched. No, girl. You're being promoted. He departed before she could process what it meant. That night, Elara lay awake, replaying the moment. The way the prince's face had lit up. The way his hands had flown, so eager and happy. And the way the king had looked at his son, when he thought no one was watching, not with anger, but with something that looked devastatingly like longing. The king's private study smelled of old leather and wood smoke. Shadows clung to the corners, undeterred by the roaring fire. Kale stood by the window, watching the moon trace silver paths across the stronghold gardens. His steward waited patiently behind him. The human waitress, Kale said without turning. What have you learned? The steward consulted his ledger. Elara Thorne, your majesty. 22 years old, came from the eastern villages 3 months ago. Her references are excellent. The sign language, Kale's fingers pressed against the cold glass. How? She had a younger brother, sire, born unable to speak or hear. She learned to communicate with him before he passed from an illness. The village healer taught them both. It is a language used in some human monasteries for silent prayer. Kale closed his eyes. He had hired 7 tutors for Rylan over the last 2 years. Professionals who taught his son the language of hands. But they were paid employees. Tonight, he had seen his son truly smile for the first time in ages. Over spilled mead, a human girl had given Rylan something no amount of power could command, someone who spoke to him just because they could. The boy was animated, Kale said softly. I've never seen his hands move so fast. Prince Rylan seemed quite taken with her, yes. Taken, such a simple word for the desperate hope that had ignited in his son's eyes. Kale had seen that look only once before, the day Rylan's mother died, when the boy had let out silent screams no one could hear, his small hands forming words his father could not comprehend. That was the day Kale had stopped trying to reach him, not from a lack of love, but because every attempt felt like watching his son drown from the shore. Assign her to the day's shift, Kale commanded. Near the prince's wing. Very good, sire. Shall I inform her of the reason? No, Kale turned from the window. Let her believe it is merely a new duty. The steward bowed and moved to the door, then hesitated. Sire, if I may. Prince Rylan has been alone for a very long time. Perhaps this accident was not so terrible after all. After the steward left, Kale sat at his desk and opened a drawer he rarely touched. Inside was a small, carved wooden wolf, a toy his late mate had made for an infant Rylan. She would have known what to do. She would have learned the hand language in a week, filling their son's quiet world with chatter. But she was gone, and Kale had a pack to lead, territories to defend, 100 daily crises. Except none of them mattered as much as the small boy who sat invisible at his own father's feasts. Kale's hand moved, trying to recall the signs he'd seen. His fingers felt clumsy. He pulled his hand back in frustration. He would deal with this tomorrow. In the servants' quarters, Elara stared at her new assignment. The prince's wing. Her roommate, Lyra, gawked at the scroll. Elara, that's where they send the most trusted servants, wolves who have served for decades. You spoke to him in that hand language, didn't you? Lyra's eyes were wide. Everyone is talking. They say he actually smiled. He's just a child, Elara said softly. A lonely one. He's the heir to the Alpha King, Lyra grabbed her shoulders. Do you understand? The king does nothing by accident. He is placing you near his son on purpose. A chill traced its way down Elara's spine. Why? Maybe he's testing you, Lyra whispered. Seeing if you're a threat. I'm not a threat, Elara's hands trembled. The prince looked so frightened when the cup broke. I just wanted to make sure he was all right. Well, tomorrow you can make sure again, Lyra squeezed her arm. Just be careful, Elara. The royal family is not like us. And that little boy, he's not just a child. He is the future of the pack. That night, Elara dreamed of small hands shaping desperate words in the darkness, and a king made of winter watching from a distance, unable to reach out. Dawn broke over the stronghold. Elara's hands shook as she carried the breakfast tray, not from its weight, but from where she was going. The prince's garden was at the end of a stone corridor lined with tapestries depicting the pack's ancestors. Their woven eyes seemed to follow her. She pushed open the iron-banded gate. The garden was a wild, beautiful place. Moonpetal flowers and shadow bloom that should have closed at dawn remained open here. A small spring bubbled over mossy rocks, and a weeping willow with silver-tinged leaves provided shade. And there, sitting on the grass, was Prince Rylan. He was examining a bird's nest, his attention absolute. The soft clink of the tray made his head snap up. His eyes widened, and his whole face transformed with that same brilliant smile. You came, he signed, scrambling up. I thought I dreamed you. Are you my new breakfast person? What's your name? His hands moved so quickly Elara almost missed it. She laughed, setting down the tray before signing back. Slow down, little prince. Yes, I am real. My name is Elara Star. Elara, he fingerspelled carefully. That's a nice name. Can you stay? Please. My teacher doesn't come until afternoon, and there's no one to talk to. He stopped, his smile faltering as that shuttered look returned. I'm sorry, he signed, his gesture small. You have work. I shouldn't ask Star. Elara's heart ached. She knelt on the dewy grass beside him. I have nowhere more important to be. For the next hour, Elara learned about Prince Rylan's world. He showed her his collection of river stones, arranged by color. He explained with elaborate gestures how he was studying the birds that visited the spring. Do you think they're sad? He signed, holding up the empty, fallen nest. That they lost their home? Maybe, Elara signed back. Asterisk, but birds are clever. They will build another star. I would build them one, but my hands are too big. He looked at his palms sadly. Asterisk, too big for bird nests. Too small for everything else star. What do you mean? Rylan hesitated. Asterisk, father has big hands. Alpha hands. For holding swords and signing treaties. My hands can only do this. Asterisk, he wiggled his fingers, talking that nobody else understands. I understand, Elara signed. You're the only one, besides my teacher, Rylan said, his sign slow. Asterisk, isn't it funny? In this whole stronghold, with hundreds of people, only 2 can hear me. And one of them is paid to star. The casual way he stated it, as if he'd accepted his isolation as fact, made Elara want to shield him from the world. Well, now you have me, she signed. And I'm not going anywhere. Rylan's eyes grew bright. He nodded, then tugged her hand. Come, I want to show you my favorite spot. He led her to a corner where the morning light made the dewy grass sparkle. This is where I come when I'm sad, he signed. Asterisk, it's pretty. Pretty things help star. They sat in comfortable silence. Elara, Rylan signed after a moment. Asterisk, why did you help me last night? You could have been punished star. Elara thought for a moment. Asterisk, because you looked scared. And no one should have to be scared and alone at the same time star. Rylan absorbed this. Then he signed with the brutal honesty of a child. I'm scared and alone a lot. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the corridor. A figure stood in the archway, silhouetted by the sun. King Kale. He wasn't in armor, just simple dark clothes that made him look less like a king and more like a man. His gaze moved from Elara to his son, then to their hands, frozen mid-conversation. Rylan scrambled to his feet, his joy vanishing. He bowed his head, small and formal. The king took a step forward, then stopped. His jaw worked, but he said nothing. Finally, he turned and walked away. Rylan slowly sat back down. He didn't sign anything else that morning. Rain lashed against the stronghold's windows. Elara had been delivering Rylan's breakfast for 6 days, and each morning he was waiting for her with a new treasure, a butterfly wing, a perfectly smooth stone. But today, the garden was empty. A small hand tugged her sleeve. She turned to find Rylan behind her, vibrating with excitement. Come with me, he signed urgently. I want to show you a secret. He pulled her through a side door she'd never noticed, down a narrow passage, and up a winding stone staircase. They emerged into a long hall ending in an enormous oak door carved with ancient pack symbols. The Royal Library. We can't, Elara signed quickly. Servants aren't allowed, but Rylan was already pushing the door open. The library was magnificent. Shelves stretched up 3 stories high, smelling of old parchment and leather. Rylan pulled her toward a low shelf filled with oversized picture books. These are pack legends, he signed. My teacher reads them, but I like telling them myself. He opened a book, and Elara saw that someone had added small diagrams for sign language in the margins. Rylan's hands began to move, telling a story about a brave warrior and a lonely wolf who couldn't howl. Elara was captivated. When he signed the part where the wolf finally let out a cry, not a howl but a gust of wind that carried wildflower seeds, she acted it out, making him laugh silently. Your turn, he signed, pushing another book into her hands. She signed a story about a she-wolf who lived in a tower, exaggerating her expressions until he clapped his hands in silent applause. He jumped up to join her, and they spun together between the towering shelves, the forbidden library, their private stage. They didn't hear the door open. Rylan, the king's voice was a blade. Elara's heart stopped. She dropped into a curtsy so fast her knees hit the stone floor. Rylan froze mid-spin. King Kale stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Forgive me, your majesty, Elara gasped. The prince wanted to. Silence, she obeyed, trembling. But the king wasn't looking at her. He was watching his son, who stood perfectly still, all the light gone from him. The king walked past Elara, past the books, until he stood before Rylan. Then he did something astonishing. He knelt, bringing himself down to his son's level. Rylan's head came up slowly, his face filled with confusion. The king's hand moved, clumsy and unsure, forming a single sign. One Elara had taught Rylan, though the king couldn't know that. Happy it was rough, but the meaning was clear. You look happy. Rylan's eyes went wide. The king looked at Elara then, and she saw not anger, but desperation. Stay, he said quietly. Continue. He moved to a chair near the window, far enough away to give them space, but close enough to watch. He simply sat and observed as Rylan, after a moment of shock, slowly picked up the storybook again. Should we? Rylan signed hesitantly to Elara. She glanced at the king. He gave a single, sharp nod. So they continued. And as his son spoke with his hands, the king watched, and for the first time, he did not look away. The whispers began. The human girl spends hours alone with the prince. In the library. The king allows it. Elara heard the rumors in the servants' hall. The other servants avoided her eyes. Lyra pulled her aside one evening, her face pale. They're saying you've bewitched him. That you're using him to get closer to the king. That's ridiculous. He's 7-inch. Elara, listen. Elder Boren spoke to the council. He called you a security risk. What truly frightened her was the look on Rylan's face when she was 10 minutes late one morning, the panic in his eyes, the way his hands trembled as he signed. I thought they made you leave. She was becoming too important to him. The summons came on a grey afternoon. The Lord Chancellor, Elder Boren, requested her presence. He was an ancient wolf, thin as a blade. Miss Thorne, he said, his back to her. You have been spending considerable time with Prince Rylan. Time that exceeds your duties. The prince enjoys having someone to talk to, my lord. The prince, Boren interrupted, turning, his eyes like chips of ice, is the heir. His companions should be chosen from high-ranking families, not plucked from the servant class. With respect, my lord, those families don't speak his language. He already communicates properly, Elara said before she could stop herself. Just not in a way you understand. Boren's eyes narrowed. Let me be clear. There are members of this court who believe Prince Rylan is unsuitable as heir. They see his silence as weakness. Your presence complicates matters. You make him comfortable in his isolation. I help him feel less alone. You help him remain helpless, Boren countered. He walked to his desk and pulled out a sealed letter. This is a transfer order. You will be reassigned to the southern garrison. Better wages, lighter duties. You will never see the prince again. Elara stared at the letter. And if I refuse? Then you will be dismissed. Take the night to consider. But understand, this is not a negotiation. It is a mercy. Elara went to the garden the next morning, her heart a stone. But when she saw Rylan waiting, her choice was made. He knew instantly something was wrong. What happened? He signed. You look sad. I'm fine, Rylan. You're lying. His small face was fierce. Did I do something wrong? Please don't be angry with me, Star. Oh, sweetheart, no. Elara knelt and took his hands. You did nothing wrong. Then what? How could she explain? Some people think I spend too much time with you. Rylan's face crumpled. They never understand, he signed, the resignation in his small hands breaking her heart. It's okay. You can go. Everyone leaves eventually, Star. That casual acceptance of abandonment was the final straw. I am not going anywhere, she signed fiercely. Do you hear me? I am staying. You are my friend. Friends don't leave star. Ryland stared at her, then threw his arms around her neck and held on, his small body shaking with silent sobs. Neither of them saw the figure watching from the balcony above, King Kale, who had heard Boren's warning, and now watched his son cling to the only person who had chosen to stay. The knock on Ryland's chamber door came after midnight. When the door opened, his father stood there. King Kale seemed too large for the frame. Ryland froze, a river stone clutched in his hand. His father never came to his chambers. The king stepped inside. "Good evening, father," Ryland signed formally, sliding off the bed to bow. Kale held up a hand. "Wait. May I sit?" Ryland nodded, confused. His father never asked permission. The king lowered himself into the small chair by Ryland's desk. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and simply looked at his son. "Did I do something wrong?" Ryland's hands moved nervously. "No," Kale's voice was rough. He stood abruptly and began to pace. "I have conquered territories, commanded armies of thousands. But I cannot," he stopped, his back to Ryland. "I cannot talk to my own son." Ryland's chest tightened. He had never heard his father sound so lost. "You move your hands so fast," the king said, turning to face him. "With Alara. I watch you, and it's like you're speaking in lightning, and he held up his own large, calloused hands. "I understand nothing. I could teach you," Ryland signed eagerly. But his father wasn't looking at his hands. Kale saw the disappointment. Something broke in his expression. He crossed the room and knelt before his son, the second time he had ever lowered himself to Ryland's level. "Show me," he said. "One sign." "For, son." Ryland's breath caught. Slowly, he raised his hand and demonstrated the simple gesture. Kale copied it, clumsy and uncertain. Ryland took his father's hand, so much larger than his own, and gently adjusted his fingers. He couldn't remember the last time they had touched. Like this, he signed with his free hand. Kale repeated it, and this time it was almost right. Ryland nodded, then showed him another sign. "Father." Kale practiced it 3 times. When he finally got it right, he looked at Ryland with an expression the prince had never seen. Relief. "Say something to me," Ryland signed, his hands trembling. "Please." His father's jaw worked. He raised his hands, forming the signs slowly. "My son, 2 words. Simple. Imperfect. Everything." Ryland's eyes flooded with tears. He launched himself at his father, wrapping his arms around the king's neck. Kale caught him, held him. When he finally pulled back, his own eyes were bright. "I need help," he spoke, then tried to sign. "Will you teach me? Will your friend, will Alara teach me?" Ryland nodded so hard his whole body shook. "Good night, my son," Kale signed from the doorway, uncertain but deliberate. "Good night, father," Ryland signed back. For the first time in 5 years, since his mother had died and his world went quiet, he allowed himself to hope. The Son's Return Festival was the pack's oldest tradition. In 7 years, Prince Ryland had never participated. But this year, King Kale's voice cut through the council's debate. "My son will stand beside me." "Your Majesty," Elder Boren ventured, "the prince cannot address the people." "He will stand beside me," Kale repeated, his tone final. "And Miss Thorne will accompany us as his interpreter," the murmurs rose. A human servant on the royal balcony? Unprecedented. "My son is the heir to this pack," Kale said, his gaze sweeping the room. It is time the pack saw him not as a silent shadow, but as their prince. This discussion is over. The morning of the festival, Alara's hands shook. In his chambers, Ryland was equally nervous. His father entered, already in full regalia. He saw his son's fear and immediately knelt. Scared, he signed. His signing had improved dramatically over the past 3 weeks of daily lessons. Rylan nodded. Me, too, Kale signed, surprising his son. But we will be scared together. And Alara will be there. You trust her, yes. Then trust this Kale's hands moved slowly. You deserve to be seen. Not hidden away like something broken star. But I am broken, Rylan signed. I can't speak like you. Kale caught his son's hands. You speak perfectly, he said aloud, then signed it. The world just needs to learn your language. The grand balcony overlooked the main courtyard where thousands had gathered. Alara stood to the side as the king emerged, majestic, and then Rylan, so small beside him. The crowd cheered, but the sound faltered as they noticed the young prince. Kale raised a hand for silence. My people, today my son joins me not as a shadow, but as your prince, he gestured to Rylan, who stepped forward, legs shaking. Prince Rylan will address you now. Miss Thorne will provide his voice. Alara moved to stand between them. Rylan looked at his father, terrified. Kale nodded. The prince's hands began to move. Thank you for coming, he signed, and Alara's voice rang out, clear and strong. I know I am different. But I can still listen. I can still care. I hope to serve you someday. She translated every word. My father taught me that strength comes in many forms, Rylan continued, glancing at the king. And my friend taught me that being different does not mean being less. He paused, then his hands moved in a sweeping gesture that needed no translation, a sign for beautiful, directed at the lanterns they carried. Someone in the crowd, a small child, waved back, mimicking the sign. Then another person signed hello, clumsy and uncertain. Then another. A ripple of movement spread through the crowd as people began raising their hands, trying to speak back to their prince. Rylan's face transformed. His signs became animated, joyful. And beside him, King Kale raised his own hands. Proud, he signed for all to see. Proud of you. The crowd understood. The cheers that erupted were not for ceremony. They were genuine, thunderous, and warm. For the first time, Prince Rylan was not invisible. He was seen. Thousands of lanterns floated into the twilight sky. From a private balcony, 3 figures watched in comfortable silence. Rylan sat between his father and Alara, his face glowing. Did you see how many people tried to sign back? His hands moved rapidly. What's he saying? Kale asked, leaning forward. He's recounting all 47 people who signed to him today, Alara translated, warmth in her voice. Kale gently caught one of his son's flying hands. Slow down, he signed carefully. I want to understand. Rylan started again, slower. When he finished, the king's hands moved deliberately. Proud of you. So proud. Rylan threw his arms around his father's waist. Thank you, Kale said quietly to Alara over his son's head. For giving him back to me. I didn't do anything, she replied. I just listened. You did everything. The king's eyes were bright. You saw him when the rest of us were blind. After a while, Rylan signed something. The king looked to Alara for help. He's asking if you'll tell him a bedtime story, she translated. In sign language. So he can understand every word. Kale's expression flickered with uncertainty, then determination. I can try, he signed. But I am not good at stories. You don't have to be good, Rylan signed back. You just have to be here. I'll leave you too, Alara said, rising. No, Rylan signed urgently. Stay. You're part of this, 2-star. So she stayed. King Kale, Alpha of Alphas, began to sign a story. It was clumsy and slow. It was about a warrior who had forgotten how to be gentle and a small bird who taught him to listen. It wasn't a very good story. But Rylan watched his father's hands with complete focus, his dark eyes shining. When the story ended, he clapped his hands in silent applause. Again, he signed. "It's late," Cale signed back, but he was smiling. Tomorrow. Promise star. At the doorway, with a sleepy Rylan in his arms, the king paused and turned back to Alara. His free hand moved. "Thank you for teaching me to see my son." "He was always there," Alara signed back. "You just needed to learn his language." "We all did," Cale agreed. "Tomorrow, I am issuing a decree. Sign language will be taught throughout the stronghold. To the guards, the servants, the council. Everyone. No child in my pack should feel invisible because the world will not learn their language." Alara remained on the balcony, watching the last lanterns disappear. Below, she saw guards already practicing signs with each other, laughing at their mistakes. A language of hands, spreading through the stronghold like wildflowers after a long winter. A new tradition born from a simple question, "Are you all right?" and an answer that changed everything. Yes. Now I am star. 6 months later, the Royal Library held its first public signing hour. Prince Rylan, now 8, taught a room full of children, human and wolf-born alike, how to sign their names. His father attended every session, sitting in the back, still learning, still trying, still there. And when Rylan signed his stories, hands moving like lightning, the entire room understood. Finally, the silent heir had found his voice, and the entire pack had learned to listen.